So day one would be roughly, I think, March 2010. We had a notion that at some point Killzone would naturally move on and the studio basically would want to have a new challenge.
With all the projects that we do, we try to do something new. Obviously, Killzone 2 was a new project for PlayStation 3. Killzone 3 was the first time we actually did a title in a very compacted development cycle, and then we included 3D in there, we included the PlayStation Move in there, the Sharpshooter, if you recall well. Then our Killzone Shadowfall project was a launch title, our first launch title for the PlayStation 4.
We've done 6 Killzones. There are brilliant first-person shooters out there. It's a very steep competitive space in that regard, having to go up against the Call of Duties and the Battlefields of this world.
And I think now it became time to do just something entirely new altogether.
We've only made new IP twice. The first time was so long ago that I don't even know how we actually did that. There aren't a lot of people that you can compare notes with. People don't tend to do this a lot.
What I had done is send out a request for pitches, and obviously strict guidelines in the sense that this needed to be a guerrilla type project.
Not just the designers, the directors, but pretty much everybody was free to pitch in and come up with an idea. And we got a total of about 36 different concepts. Anything basically from zombie games till puzzle games.
So we started out with a smaller team to look into exploring what those concepts would mean if we would develop them. And at some point we took 2 forward. Worked on those, prototyped for like half a year or so. And we did some testing with some external people from Sony that are not in our office and internally as well. And it was kind of 50-50 at some point.
There were a lot of people in the company that weren't necessarily hardcore first-person shooter fans. They were more on the RPG aspects. Taking a different genre in mind was actually not that weird of a step. It was more like, okay, well, if we're gonna do this, and we're going to do this well, then basically let's pick something basically that a very large part of the company would like to make as a game.
We actually put all the feedback that we got from people about the concept, we put them in an Excel sheet, very traditional. And we had these 2 graphs, like what excites you most and what do you think is the most risky one. The project that was standing out on both charts was Horizon.
It was certainly not the least risky, but definitely the one where everybody that saw the pitch, the original pitch, they said, well, we gotta make this. This is maybe incredibly risky, but it's something that is so radically different and so inspiring that it actually took me very little time to convince the team to jump behind it, and we wanted to make that straight away.
And this is an action RPG, open world. We didn't have any tools, we didn't have an engine that supported open world. At the same time, it was such an exciting concept, so we cancelled all work on the second project and continued just on Horizon.
So the original pitch came from me. It was pretty much the trailer that we showed in 2015, put together from pieces from movies that I found, and yeah, it was a presentation, a PowerPoint presentation to the team. I've been playing with concepts like this in my head. I wanted to do something where robot combat was a thing. A couple of months ago, I went back to my parents' place and I found all my old Zoid magazines and toys, and so like, oh, I guess something from that stuck in my mind and came out till I finally was 40.
Back then, the pitch that he had the core components in there, like the lush nature, the machines and the tribes.
Killzone is beautiful, but it's steel and concrete, and this allowed us to just sort of blossom as an art team and do something quite fresh and new.
We're very happy, I think, that he pitched that concept. But the big challenge when we chose that concept was we didn't know what the story was. We didn't know actually what the gameplay was. We didn't know how to really make sense of that combination in terms of a game, in terms of the world, how it would operate. We spent a couple of years actually trying to figure out how to make sense of it all and how to turn it into something that could work as a game. It's been quite a challenge. It is sometimes difficult for people to see what the end product will be at early stages. So what we often do is we start out with making concept images.
We have a couple of key pieces that we use throughout the entire track. Some of those were actually one of those leaked concept pieces that is out there.
Those kind of images really trigger something here in the studio as well, and people get excited by them.
We started calling it BBC realism. It's sort of like a heightened version of reality. It looks absolutely gorgeous.
And then you sort of have this goal of trying to make that image playable.
Because if you don't have it playable, it's just an idea.
So then you forget a little bit about the risks and you just try to make that image work.
First-person shooters tend to be just long spaghetti twirls basically that you move through, and it's a fairly linear experience. And sort of unwinding ourselves from a linear narrative and a linear game flow to something that's open world and has all these possibilities was quite a challenge for people in their head at least.
So there's immediately this huge design challenge, and that really excites me personally as well.
Try not to pull the strings, just try to let the player express themselves. So we got people in from Bethesda, we got people in from CD Projekt, people who understand the flow of this a little bit better, and that really helped basically shape the team and shape the team's knowledge about how these games should be developed and how they should flow.
At the very start, when we had this small team of maybe 10 people using Killzone assets, we built a small forest. We had Jammer, which is a Killzone 3 character, in as playable character, so we had a female protagonist already running. And we were using a modified Killzone gun as a primitive weapon. But we made a model and an animation for the Watcher that's still currently in the game. And the way we had it animated and how it lifted its head and looked around, in combination with the wind and the trees that we put in as well, and the atmosphere, and then sneaking through tall grass to approach it, we noticed that we had something special in terms of the experience.
I think one of the things that we have as an advantage coming from Killzone is that we spent 15 years making combat mechanics. A very frenetic, high-paced, intense, direct control combat mechanics. Because our RPGs tend to have a background in sort of more dice roll aspects, where they're very much about tables of chances and those sort of things. And actually sort of taking that direct input side of gaming and putting that into an RPG naturally created a switch there on how the game played and felt. We made an RPG, but it felt like an action game.
I don't know if you know Duplo, but it's basically like the big Lego. We made a Duplo model of the Thunderjaw. This is like 5 years ago. And we had a very first version of that thing already walking around. And you could shoot off the plates, you could shoot off the rocket launcher and pick it up. And all those things that we managed to get into that early prototype survived the 5 years. And we kept working on it and make that robot actually look cool and develop the art style for it and have proper animations and come up with Aloy actually.
We have a stack of drawings about this high, full of drawings of Aloy, of what she could look like. Originally she had black hair. She's also very fierce. There's a form of wildness and rebelliousness to it. We were looking at aspects visually that could emphasize that in our character. It was always amusing that we have journalists coming out to us at E3, and last year somebody showed me this picture of Ygritte from Games of Thrones. Like, is he based on that? It's like, we've been working on this since 2011. It didn't even exist back then. We didn't want to over-feminize her. She shouldn't be wearing metal bikinis and those sort of things, and her armor should look appropriate and work. She's not a supermodel because almost nobody looks like a supermodel, so why would she look like a supermodel?
When we were in development for early stages, the majority of the team was still on Killzone Shadowfall. And only since, I think, 2.5 years ago, we got a full team. At that point, we really started investing and developing tools.
Being technology nerds that we are, we sort of also liked the challenge of doing something that complicated and ambitious.
So at the start, when we were making a new quest, it would take us maybe 2 to 4 weeks or even longer. But right now we have tools and we can make a quest in, say, like half a day. That's been quite an investment, but it's really paying off at this point.
So the sequel's just going to fly by.
Of course, yeah.
So when you look behind you and you have this huge project that you guys have been toiling away at for years, how confident are you? How are you feeling about this thing at this point?
Confident, with reservations as always with any product. You never know how it completely shapes up until it's done, and you basically sit back and see what happens. But so far the reception has been very positive. Both E3s have been very successful for us.
Getting the first response was awesome. Seeing that people liked it, seeing that people got it, because we had this fear that people would go like, that's just batshit crazy. You know? We literally tend to just read everything because I guess we're deeply insecure somehow. All of NeoGAF literally gets read and then analyzed and then put through word processors, and then we make these word clouds out of it and go like, oh, they like it.
We're quite far in development now, but we're often so deep in the trenches developing this game that now that we're actually going more into playtesting, you sort of come out of the trenches and start looking at how big the project actually has become and how many features we kept just pouring in. And now we kind of realize that we've made a really big game.
It's a very rich game. We've only literally shown this little bit of the iceberg. We have so many ideas still of where we want to go with the universe, so that some of those things might come back at a later stage.
So we are now fortunately in a state of development where we're really working on everything, right? We're working on all the quests, we're working on all the elements of the game, which is a good thing, which means we're now polishing up things, we're balancing things.
So this is the part of the project where it all becomes about numbers. So as an art director, you're looking at Excel sheets, moving things around like, oh, let's take some polygons out of this, let's make this a fraction of a millisecond faster and see if the game still looks as pretty.
I play the game every day. I basically get lost in the world myself, just listening to the music, walking around, fighting these machines.
It's almost like an 80s cartoon concept coming into a new age, and that's very cool to see. We're lucky the company has this sort of brave aspect to it, that they're willing to do it, because ultimately at the end of the day, basically, if it doesn't work, all our jobs are on the line to some degree.
When you get a chance within an organization like PlayStation and you're offered the opportunity to build something that is this radically different and that's a large AAA project, I mean, who gets the opportunity to work on this with a lot more than 100 people from scratch? I see it as a vast opportunity and one that we shouldn't mess up.
10 years from now, when we're looking back at it, we'll probably be amazed that we were even allowed and able to do it. How the hell did we come from here and end up there?
So how the hell did you go from there to there?
We have no idea anymore.